September 25th, 1944. Westminster, London. Down at the war rooms beneath 10 Downing Street, things are way quieter than they've been in years. Winston Churchill's standing next to this massive map table, teacup in his hand, watching morning sunlight creep through those reinforced windows. And for the first time since this whole nightmare kicked off in 1939, victory actually feels within reach. France, liberated, Allied forces, pushing toward the Rhine River, that last major obstacle before they can slam into Germany's heartland. Everything's looking solid. General Hastings is May, Churchill's chief of staff, walks in real quiet and joins him at the map. They've been going over the situation in Holland, where Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's big gamble, Operation Market Garden, has been running for 8 straight days. The reports coming in, mixed, at best, but Monty keeps telling everybody it's going according to plan. Then this young aide walks in, pale as hell, carrying a folder stamped Urgent Market Garden Eyes Only. Churchill takes it without saying a word, opens it up, and you can see his whole face change. That teacup freezes halfway to his lips. He sets it down real slow. How many? The words come out barely above a whisper. The aide swallows hard. Approximately 10,000 casualties, sir. The 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem. They've been nearly wiped out. The bridge, we couldn't hold it. They had to evacuate what was left of them. Churchill doesn't move, just stares at that report. 10,000 British casualties in 9 days for a bridge they didn't even capture. An operation that was supposed to end the war by Christmas just became one of the bloodiest Allied disasters since the... He looks up at Ismay. Where's General Patton right now? Ismay steps over to the map, points to a spot east of Nancy, deep in eastern France, getting close to the German frontier. Here, sir. 3rd Army took Nancy 4 days ago. They're advancing toward the border. Churchill stares at the map. At Montgomery's position up north, at Patton's position 200 miles south. He sets that Market Garden folder down on the table like it weighs a ton. Get me the fuel allocation reports. Montgomery's and Patton's. I want to see exactly what we gave them. What Churchill's about to discover is going to set off a political firestorm that nearly tears apart the Allied command structure. If you want to see how this whole thing plays out, how one of the most dramatic military comparisons in history unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. Smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Because what Churchill learns in the next hour, it's gonna change everything. The reports show up within 20 minutes. Churchill spreads them across the table. Isma's reading over his shoulder. And the numbers? They're absolutely brutal. Operation Market Garden, September 17th through 25th, 1944. 9 days. Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group got absolute priority for supplies. Check this out. 1,400 tons of fuel per day. Every single truck, every gallon, every available resource got funneled north to support the biggest airborne operation in history. De Gaulle capture a series of bridges across the Netherlands, cross the Rhine at Arnhem, drive into Germany's industrial heartland, the Ruhr region. End the war by Christmas. The result, the British 1st Airborne Division dropped at Arnhem on September 17th. They were supposed to hold that bridge for 2 days until ground forces showed up. But those ground forces never made Italiano. German resistance was way stronger than intelligence predicted. 2 SS Panzer divisions, veterans, experienced, absolutely deadly, were refitting near Arnhem. Nobody saw that coming. Those British paratroopers fought for 9 straight days, surrounded, outnumbered, running out of ammo and medical supplies. On September 25th, the survivors got evacuated across the Rhine in the middle of the night. Out of 10,000 men who dropped at Arnhem, only 2,000 made it back. Total Market Garden casualties, over 10,000. Total territorial gain, 64 miles into Holland. Total strategic objectives achieved, 0. That Rhine Bridge at Arnhem, the whole reason for the operation, stayed in German hands. Now Churchill looks at the second report. 3rd Army operations, same exact dates, September 17 through 25. General George Patton's 3rd Army got 700 tons of fuel per day, exactly half what Montgomery received, operating 200 miles south, advancing through Lorraine toward the German border. No special priority, no special resources. In fact, Patton had been complaining for weeks that he was being deliberately starved of fuel, while Montgomery got everything he asked for. The result? Here's where it gets crazy. In those same 9 days, while Market Garden was collapsing up north, Patton's Third Army captured 12 fortified cities, Nancy-Luneville, Château Salins, and 9 others. They crossed 3 major rivers, the Moselle, the Morthe, the Mortheni. They advanced 60 miles. They took 45,000 German prisoners. They inflicted an estimated 55,000 German casualties through combat and capture. Third Army casualties. Approximately 2,100. Churchill reads those numbers once. Then again, then a third time. He takes off his glasses, rubes his eyes, puts them back on, reads them one more time. Pug, he says quietly to Ismay, using his nickname, tell me if I'm reading this correctly. Ismay hesitates. Sir, I verified these figures with 3 separate sources. Just tell me. Montgomery received 1,400 tons of fuel per day. He advanced 64 miles in 9 days. That's about 7 miles per day on average. He suffered 10,000 casualties. He achieved none of his strategic objectives. Churchill nods slowly. And Patton, 700 tons per day. Half. He advanced 60 miles, nearly the same distance, while conducting 3 major river crossings and capturing 12 cities. 2,000 casualties, 45,000 enemy prisoners, and according to the latest reports, he's now positioned less than 20 miles from the German border, near Saarbrücken. Churchill walks over to the map, traces the supply routes with one finger. Every truck, every ton of fuel, every priority shipment went north to Montgomery for Market Garden. Meanwhile, Patton, operating on Hafrasians, won battle after battle. He turns to Ismay. His voice is dangerously calm. Get me General Eisenhower on the telephone. Immediately. The secure line connects at 10 a.m. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, Versailles, France. General Dwight Eisenhower's in a staff meeting when his aide interrupts to say the Prime Minister is on the line. Eisenhower knows immediately this isn't going to be pleasant. Churchill only calls directly when something's very wrong. Good morning, Prime Minister. Ike Churchill's voice is clipped, formal. I need you to explain something to me, and I assure you, I'll need to explain this to Parliament within 48 hours, so I'd appreciate some clarity. Of course, sir. Why did we authorize an operation that consumed our entire logistical capacity and delivered us the single bloodiest week since D-Day? There's a pause. Eisenhower's staff, listening on extensions, exchange glances. Prime Minister, Market Garden was a calculated risk. Field Marshal Montgomery believed, and our intelligence supported, that German resistance in the north was collapsing. The plan was to exploit that weakness with a rapid thrust supported by airborne forces. I attended the briefings. Ike. I know what the plan was. What I need to understand is why General Patton is capturing German cities with half the fuel while Monty's taking casualties with all of it. Eisenhower chooses his words carefully. Georgia sector faces lighter opposition. The Saar region isn't as heavily defended as the Rhine crossings. The strategic importance. Don't insult my intelligence. 45,000 prisoners isn't light opposition. Those are entire divisions. Divisions that could have reinforced Arnhem. Patton's destroying German units. Montgomery lost an entire airborne division trying to capture one bridge. Winston, I understand your frustration. Do you? Because, here's what I'm seeing. We gave Montgomery everything he asked for. Absolute priority. 1,400 tons of fuel per day. Elite airborne divisions. Total air superiority. And he produced a disaster. Meanwhile, we gave Patton half that amount, and he's knocking on Germany's door. So help me understand the logic. Eisenhower sighs. It's barely audible over the phone, but Churchill hears it. Monty has requested a meeting to discuss future operations. He believes that with renewed resources, a concentrated push toward the Ruhr, more resources. Churchill's voice rises. After this, Ike, here's what I want you to tell Field Marshal Montgomery. The Prime Minister's office would very much like to understand why the general who demanded absolute priority for 9 days has produced absolute disaster. Can you convey that message? Winston, I need to be frank with you. Publicly criticizing Montgomery right now could fracture Allied unity at a critical moment. Allied unity didn't save those paratroopers at Arnhem, and unity doesn't win wars. Ike. Results do. Patton gets results. Why are we punishing him for Montgomery's failures? Eisenhower's voice is tight now. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm trying to maintain a coalition, then maintain it with competence, not politics. I'll be visiting France next week. I'd like to tour both sectors, Montgomery's and Patton's. I want to see for myself where our resources went. Churchill hangs up before Eisenhower can respond. His May watches Churchill light a cigar with shaken hands. The Prime Minister stares at that map for a long moment. "Get me the casualty lists," he says quietly. "All of them. Every name. I want to know exactly who we lost at Arnhem." Within 24 hours, the British press has the whole story. The Daily Telegraph runs a front-page headline: "Arnhem, 10,000 casualties in failed Rhine crossing." By noon, every newspaper on Fleet Street has reporters demanding answers. By evening, they've got the fuel allocation numbers. Someone leaked them, probably from Churchill's office, though nobody can prove it. The questions start rolling in immediately. Why was Montgomery given every resource while Patton was starved? Why did the Prime Minister approve an operation that cost 10,000 men for zero gain? Why are American generals succeeding while British generals fail? Labour MPs start preparing questions for Parliament. Churchill's office receives over 300 letters in 2 days, from families demanding explanations. Mothers, wives, sisters. Why did my son die for Montgomery's vanity? Why wasn't the intelligence about German tanks taken seriously? Why are we losing men while the Americans are winning? At Supreme Headquarters in Versailles, Eisenhower's staff is in full crisis mode. Montgomery arrives on September 28th demanding a private meeting. It lasts 3 hours. Voices can be heard through the closed door. Montgomery's tone is defensive, insistent. He blames the weather, unexpected German resistance, intelligence failures, the Polish paratroopers who were supposed to reinforce Arnhem but dropped in the wrong location. Eisenhower's chief of staff, General Walter Bedell Smith, stands outside the door listening. When Montgomery finally leaves, back rigid, jaw clenched, Smith enters Eisenhower's office. Ike looks exhausted. "How bad?" Smith asks. He wants another offensive, full resources, single thrust toward the Ruhr. He says Market Garden failed because we didn't give him enough. Smith just stares. He lost 10,000 men with absolute priority, and he wants more. He says Patton's success is irrelevant because the Saar isn't strategically important. Smith shakes his head slowly. George took 45,000 prisoners. That's not irrelevant. That's devastating to German combat power. Eisenhower rubs his temples. Churchill's coming. He wants to tour both sectors. That's gonna be a disaster. I know. Meanwhile, 200 miles south, General Omar Bradley, Patton's immediate superior and commander of 12th Army Group, submits a formal logistics request to Eisenhower's headquarters. It's carefully worded, professional, but everyone who reads it understands exactly what it means. Third Army is positioned to reach the Rhine within 10 days, if provided adequate fuel allocation. Current operational tempo demonstrates capacity for sustained offensive operations with minimal casualties and maximum territorial gain. Recommend immediate increase in supply priority to exploit current tactical advantages before German forces consolidate defensive positions. The final line becomes legendary within Allied headquarters. Bradley adds, almost as an afterthought, "We are winning a war with our hands tied, while others lose it with both hands free." Bradley never mentions Montgomery by name. He doesn't have to. The request circulates through every level of Allied command. Eisenhower's staff debates it. British liaison officers protest it. American generals quietly support it. And George Patton, reading a copy in his headquarters in Nancy, grins and writes in his diary, "Brad finally said it. About damn time." October 1st, 1944. Churchill makes an unannounced visit to France. He flies into Versailles and goes straight to Eisenhower's headquarters. British and American generals gather nervously in the conference room. Churchill enters, carrying a bound report. Thick, official, stamped with the War Office seal. He sets it on the conference table with a heavy thud. "Gentlemen," he says, "I've had my staff compile a comprehensive analysis of operations from September 17th through 25th. I thought it might be useful for our discussion." He opens the report. The first page is a comparison chart. 2 columns, side by side. Operation Market Garden, 21st Army Group, September 17 through 25, 1944. Fuel allocation, 1,400 tons per day casualties. 10,005 cities captured, 0. Rivers crossed, 0. Attempted 1, failed. Strategic objectives achieved, 0 enemy prisoners, 3,200. Territorial gain, 64 miles. Final position, Nijmegen, Netherlands. 1 bridge, short of goal. 3rd Army Operations, September 17th through 25, 1944. Fuel allocation, 700 tons per day casualties, 2,100. Cities captured, 12. Nancy, Lunéville, Chateau, Salines, Pont-à-Mousson, Nomani, among others. Rivers crossed. 3. Moselle, Mortagne. Strategic objectives achieved: breach Sigrid line defenses, threaten Saar industrial region enemy prisoners, 45,000. Territorial gain, 60 miles. Final position: German border, near Churchill looks around the room. British officers stare at the table. American officers try not to look smug. I have one question, Churchill says, and I need someone to answer it honestly. How is this possible? Silence. We gave Montgomery everything, every resource, every priority, and George Patton, with half the fuel, produced results that make Market Garden look like a training exercise gone wrong. So I'll ask again, how is this possible? Eisenhower clears his throat. Prime Minister, the operational contexts are different. Montgomery faced entrenched SS divisions, so did Patton. The 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division at Nancy. He destroyed it in 3 days. The terrain in Holland is flat, ideal for armor. Patton crossed 3 rivers and fought through the Vosges foot. So no, Ike, I don't accept terrain as an explanation. A British general, one of Montgomery's staff officers, speaks up carefully. Prime Minister, if I may, Field Marshal Montgomery's objective was more ambitious. A single thrust deep into enemy territory requires competence. Churchill interrupts, which brings me to my next question. I'm visiting the front tomorrow. I'll be touring the Market Garden battlefield with Field Marshal Montgomery, and then I'll be visiting General Patton's sector. I suspect the contrast will be illuminating. October 2nd, 1944. The Netherlands. Churchill's motorcade arrives in the staging area for Market Garden. The operation ended 1 week ago, but the evidence of disaster is everywhere. Destroyed gliders scattered across fields, burned out vehicles lining the roads, temporary graves, marked with helmets and rifles standing in neat rows. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery meets Churchill at the headquarters tent. He's impeccably dressed as always, confident posture, but there's tension in his jaw. Prime Minister, I'm glad you could visit. I think once you see the situation firsthand, you'll understand the challenges we faced. Churchill says nothing. He simply gestures toward the nearest jeep. Show me. They drive north along the highway British armored divisions were supposed to use to reach Arnhem. Hell's Highway, the soldiers call it. The roads lined with destroyed tanks, British, American, German. Every few miles there are craters from German artillery, burned, shattered bridges that engineers are still repairing. Montgomery explains, as they drive, the intelligence failure was significant. Prime Minister, we had no indication of SS Panzer divisions in the area. The 9th and 10th SS were supposed to be refitting in Germany, but they were here, near Arnhem, at full strength. You were warned, Churchill says quietly. Montgomery pauses. I'm sorry, Dutch resistance. They reported German armor. You dismissed it. The intelligence was inconclusive. Resistance reports are often exaggerated. 4,500 men of the 1st Airborne Division are dead or captured because you decided inconclusive intelligence wasn't worth considering. Montgomery's face hardens. Prime Minister, with respect, command decisions in combat require. I'm not interested in lectures on command decisions, Bernard. I'm interested in why you made the wrong ones. They reached the Nijmegen Bridge, the farthest point Market Garden achieved. American paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne captured this bridge in a heroic assault, crossing the Vol River in flimsy canvas boats under heavy fire. It's one of the few successes of the entire operation. Churchill looks north. 10 miles away, barely visible in the distance, is Arnhem. The bridge too far. This is where it ended, Montgomery says. We held here. If the 1st Airborne could have held Arnhem for just 1 more day. They held for 9 days. Bernard, 9 days, surrounded by SS Panzer divisions. They held longer than anyone thought possible. The failure wasn't theirs. It was yours. Montgomery stiffens. Prime Minister, I resent. I'm not finished. Churchill turns to face him directly. Yesterday I visited Nancy. Do you know what I saw there? Montgomery says, nothing. I saw a city that General Patton captured 4 days ago, with 700 tons of fuel per day. Half what you had. The city was intact. Civilians were returning. American engineers were already repairing infrastructure. And do you know what General Patton told me when I asked about his casualties? Montgomery's jaw clenches. He said, acceptable, Mr. Prime Minister. We keep moving, and they can't hurt us. Then he showed me his maps. 12 cities, 3 rivers, 45,000 prisoners. All in the same week you lost 10,000 men for one bridge you didn't capture. The situations are not comparable, Montgomery says tightly. You're right, Churchill replies. Dire? Not, because Patton won and you lost. That evening, Churchill insists on visiting Arnhem itself. The town's still partially held by German forces, so they can only approach the southern bank of the Rhine. Across the river, the Arnhem Bridge stands intact, covered with German vehicles and troops. British paratroopers fought for 9 days to hold the northern end of that bridge. They were evacuated what was left of them 1 week ago. Churchill stands on the riverbank and stares across the water. Montgomery stands beside him, silent. After a long moment, Churchill speaks. A bridge too far. That's what they're calling it, aren't they? The soldiers? Yes, sir. I'm starting to think it wasn't the bridge that was too far, Bernard. It was the ambition without the ability to match it. They returned to the temporary headquarters in Eindhoven. Large tent, maps covering every surface. Eisenhower's there. General Ismay. Several staff officers. The atmosphere's tense as hell. Churchill sits, lights a cigar, looks at Montgomery. Bernard, I want you to answer a question, and I want you to answer it truthfully. Montgomery nods, stiffly. Why did Market Garden fail, while Patton succeeds? Prime Minister, as I've explained, the situations are not comparable. I faced 2 SS Panzer divisions that intelligence failed to identify. General Patton faces disorganized rearguard units in a secondary sector. 45,000 prisoners. Churchill interrupts. In 1 week, were those disorganized rearguard units kind enough to surrender, or did Patton have to fight actual German divisions to capture them? Montgomery's face flushes. Patton's Let's discuss intelligence, Churchill continues. You were warned about German Armar, near Arnhem. Dutch resistance, area, recognize. You dismissed it. Why? The intelligence was inconclusive. I made a command decision based on the strategic opportunity. The strategic opportunity to do what? Exactly. Lose an entire airborne division. The room goes dead silent. Eisenhower shifts uncomfortably. Ismay stares at his notes. Montgomery's voice is quiet, controlled. That is an insulting Then simplify for me. Churchill leans forward. You had priority. You had supplies. You had elite troops. The finest paratroopers Britain has ever produced. You had complete air superiority. You had every advantage. Patton had half your fuel and won battles every single day. So simplify it, Field Marshal. Why did you fail? I did not fail, Montgomery says. His voice is rising now. We achieved significant territorial gain. We drew German forces north, relieving pressure on other sectors. We prevented a German You lost 10,000 men, Churchill says. Each word is clipped. Precise. For a bridge you don't have. For a river you didn't cross. For an objective you didn't achieve. And while you were losing those men, George Patton was liberating French cities and taking German prisoners by the thousands. Now I have to go to Parliament next week and explain this to the British people. And, frankly, Bernard, I'm struggling to find an explanation that doesn't make you look Eisenhower interrupts. Gentlemen, recriminations won't help. Churchill doesn't look away from Montgomery. I'm not recriminating, Ike. I'm evaluating, and my evaluation is this. We gave Montgomery the chance to be brilliant. Montgomery stands abruptly. If the Prime Minister believes I'm unfit for command, sit down, Bernard. Churchill's voice cuts like ice. I'm not finished. Montgomery sits. His face is rigid. Every officer in that tent is staring at the floor. The maps, anywhere except at the 2 men. Churchill takes a long pull on his cigar. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter, colder. Here is what I will tell Parliament. Operation Market Garden was a gamble, a bold gamble, and it failed. And it failed. Wars are not won by gambling, Field Marshal. They're won by generals who deliver results with the resources available. Not by generals who demand all the resources and deliver nothing but condolences. He stands, looks around the room. George Patton is that general. He takes what you give him and wins. You, Bernard, are not. The silence that follows is suffocating. Montgomery's face is white. Eisenhower looks like he wants to be anywhere else on Earth. Isma's writing notes with extraordinary focus, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Churchill walks to the tent entrance. Pauses, turns back. One more thing. I understand, General. Bradley has requested increased fuel allocation for Third Army. I'll be recommending to the combined chiefs of staff that we approve it. And ellipse. Montgomery sits motionless for a full minute. Tinistans nods curtly to Eisenhower and walks out without a word. Eisenhower looks at his staff. Well, that could have gone worse. Nobody laughs. The political earthquake that follows reshapes Allied strategy for the rest of the war. Montgomery retains his command. Firing him would create a British political crisis that Churchill can't afford. But his influence, satire, the single-thrust strategy he's been advocating, concentrate all resources on his front for one massive push into Germany, is permanently rejected. Eisenhower's broad front approach becomes official policy. Every sector advances. No more priority for Montgomery. Within a week, Patton's Third Army receives increased fuel allocation. By mid-October, they've advanced another 40 miles. By November, they're positioned along the German border, preparing to assault the Siegfried Line fortifications. Montgomery's 21st Army Group spends October and November clearing the Scheldt estuary to open the port of Antwerp. Vital work, sure, but unglamorous. The headlines. They belong to Patton. The statistical comparison from September through October 1944 becomes part of official military history. Montgomery's 21st Army Group, 15,000 casualties, 40 miles advanced. One major city captured, Antwerp, though the port remains unusable until the Scheldt is cleared in November. Minimal German prisoners. Patton's Third Army, 8,000 casualties. 100 miles advanced, 18 cities captured, 67,000 prisoners. German forces in Lorraine, effectively destroyed. Churchill never publicly humiliates Montgomery in Parliament. He's too skilled a politician for that. But his report to the House of Commons on October 10th is damning in its restraint. He praises the courage of the British paratroopers at Arn. He acknowledges the difficulty of the operation. And then he says, almost casually, one cannot help but observe that in modern war, boldness must be married to flexibility and speed. Some commanders possess this combination naturally, others do not. Everyone knows who he means. In his private diary, Churchill's more blunt. He writes on October 5th, visited both sectors. The contrast is staggering. Patton moves like lightning. Montgomery plans like a lawyer and executes like a clerk. I have never seen such a disparity between promise and performance. Years later, when writing his war memoirs, Churchill addresses Market Garden with unusual directness. There is no reason to assign blame to any individual. The plan was bold, the execution determined, the courage of our airborne forces beyond question. Yet one cannot help but observe that in war, as in life, some men achieve the improbable through will and skill combined. General Patton was such a man. He made the difficult look easy. Others, despite every advantage, make the easy look difficult. He never names Montgomery. He doesn't have to. In December 1944, the Germans launched their final major offensive, the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler throws everything into a desperate assault through the Ardennes, creating a massive bulge in the Allied lines. American forces at Bastogne are surrounded. Eisenhower calls an emergency meeting. The situation's critical. Who can relieve Bastogne? Montgomery, commanding to the north, says he'll need 3 weeks to organize a proper planning, proper supplies, proper preparation. Patton, attending the meeting from the south, looks at the map. I can be there in 48 hours. Eisenhower stares at him. George, that's impossible. You'd have to turn your entire army 90 degrees north in the middle of winter. 48 hours. Patton repeats. Give me the word and I'll have 3 divisions moving by tomorrow morning. He does it. Third Army pivots north, advances through snow and ice, and reaches Bastogne in 72 hours. It's the fastest major redeployment in military history. The siege is broken. The German offensive collapses. Montgomery's counteroffensive launches 3 weeks later, as promised. By then, Patton's already driven the Germans back 20 miles. Churchill hears the news and writes to his wife. Patton has done it again. Monty is still planning. In his diary on December 28, 1944, Patton writes Bastogne relieved. Third Army moved 100 miles in 72 hours, turned an entire corps 90 degrees, and broke a German siege. Meanwhile, Monty is still preparing his positions. Churchill was right. Some generals deliver. Others make excuses. The final assessment of Market Garden versus Third Army operations becomes a case study in military academies for generations. It illustrates a fundamental principle of warfare. Resources don't win battles. Leadership does. Montgomery had everything. Patton had half. Montgomery failed. Patton succeeded. The reason as Churchill understood viscerally, was simple. Patton was a warrior who understood that war rewards aggression, flexibility, and speed. Montgomery was a planner who believed war could be controlled through meticulous preparation. Both approaches have merit, but in the fluid, chaotic environment of 1944 France and Germany, only one worked. Churchill's judgment on Montgomery was final. In private correspondence with Roosevelt in November 1944, he wrote, "Monty remains a capable defensive commander, but offensive warfare requires a different temperament. George es Italiano. Bernard does not. We must use each man according to his abilities." Montgomery never received priority again. Patton never stopped moving. And the war, contrary to Montgomery's predictions that Market Garden would end it by Christmas 1944, continued until May 1945. But when Germany finally surrendered, Third Army was deeper into German territory than any other Allied force. They had advanced over 600 miles from Normandy, captured over 300,000 prisoners, liberated over 80 major cities. Montgomery's final position, in May 1945, northern Germany, having advanced cautiously and methodically from Holland. Patton's final position, Czechoslovakia, having raced across southern Germany so fast that Eisenhower had to order him to stop. The lesson of Market Garden wasn't that bold operations fail. It's that bold operations require bold commanders. Montgomery tried to be something he wasn't. Patton was always exactly what he appeared to be. Churchill recognized the difference, and once he did, the balance of power in Allied command shifted permanently. If you found this story as mind-blowing as the thousands of others who've discovered the untold truths of World War II, make sure you're subscribed. There are dozens more stories like this, moments where history pivoted on individual decisions, where the truths is more dramatic than any fiction. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me which general you think was better, and stick around, because we've got more incredible stories coming your way.